Welcome to Grace Church on the Hill in Toronto. And today I have a nice conversation with my friend in curate, the Reverend Deacon Micah Latimer-Dennis, who's just returned from sunny Rome, of all places, in January, to come back to this cold, snowy Toronto. So I guess the first things I'd like to explore with you, Micah, is what, besides the weather and the good food and the antiquity of Rome, what drew you to Rome in January of 2020, 2022?
Yes. Well, it wasn't just the pasta alla matriciana, though that was a draw. I was taking part in a course on Christian unity at the Anglican Center in Rome, co-sponsored with a seminary in the United States, and we're kind of exploring what unity between Christians and specifically between Anglicans and Roman Catholics, kind of the course of that journey throughout history and what it looks like today.
Was this your first trip to Rome?
It was my first trip, yes.
Oh. What were your initial impressions flying from snowy Canada?
Yeah. It was extraordinary, you know. You walk out the door and there's the Colosseum, and you look around the corner and there's the Forum. I was thinking, right when we arrived, we passed a little church that had some scaffolding on it, and I was curious how old it was. And of course it's a 15th century church. It's older than every church on this continent, I think. And that's just the one on the corner. So having that kind of contact with the past and with the Christian tradition, I found just fascinating.
Tell us a bit about the Anglican Center in Rome. People might be surprised to know that in the middle of Rome there is a center for Anglicans.
Yeah. Well, the Anglican Center, I think, has been there for about 55 years. And the Archbishop of Canterbury has a representative there. His name's Archbishop Jan Ernest. He's also the Archbishop of the Diocese of, of the province of the Indian Ocean. So he's sort of the representative to the Vatican, to Pope Francis, and it was fascinating for me to see just who comes in the door of the Anglican Center. A lot of Roman Catholic clergy and people associated with the Pontifical Institute for promoting Christian unity. It's kind of a hub for ecumenical conversations. It's a very small building. You know, after you go to the Vatican, it feels tiny, but there's quite a bit of activity there about people coming from around the world, Anglicans and non-Anglicans, to sort of listen in on the conversation about Christian unity that's going on there.
And this isn't just for clergy?
No, it's not, yeah, and they host conferences and classes that are open to everyone.
So someone from this parish could presumably take a course at the Anglican Center?
I think so, yeah. They have a website, and Archbishop Jan is very welcoming. He made sure we had everything we needed, including some very delicious Italian pastries, so I can heartily recommend the Anglican Center.
And where is the Anglican Center in Rome? Is it in downtown Rome?
It is. It's not, of course my geography's a little fuzzy, but it's near the Pantheon. It's actually in a palace, in the corner of a palace that has some beautiful artwork and a few churches within it too. But it's on the second floor there.
So tell us a bit about the specific course that you attended.
Yeah.
And who hosted it and who led it.
Sure, yeah. So it was mostly taught by a professor of liturgics at Nashotah House, which is an Episcopal seminary in Wisconsin. And it was sort of tracing the trajectory of conversations about Christian unity right from kind of early Christian reflections on the unity of the church, all the way back to Augustine, and then all the way up to contemporary discussions between Anglican representatives and Roman Catholic representatives, which are still ongoing. So I know our own primate, Linda Nichols, has been very heavily involved in those conversations in the Anglican Church of Canada. And so that's, yeah, it's something that's, especially since Vatican II in the 1960s, has really picked up speed, and after, many centuries of relative chilliness or sometimes outright violence, there's been quite a growth of recognition of the gifts that we each have to give one another, and a desire to walk more closely together.
Is this something that you personally are drawn to, this work of ecumenism, or is this a new interest of yours?
It's relatively new. I didn't grow up in an Anglican parish, so I think coming into Anglicanism, I've always wondered about its relation to other churches. So there's been that draw, but yeah, it was a surprise, I think, for me to go to Rome and feel quite a bit of warmth from Roman Catholic clergy and laity who really seem to want to work closely with Anglicans and see where God might be leading us in terms of church unity.
So many of the people attending the course were from the United States, were they? Because it was Wisconsin, the Shoto House.
Yeah. We had several, so most were Anglicans, but we had a few Roman Catholic students, one priest from Nigeria. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have a delegation from South Africa and Kenya, but Italy's COVID rules meant they weren't able to participate. But yeah, I found it a very a nice little church in miniature of people coming from different parts of the communion and also from outside the communion. You can talk about church unity in a classroom, but then when you're out visiting the churches, it feels a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Just tell us a bit about the content of the course. I think there were excursions as well as lectures, weren't there?
There were, yeah. So a lot of the course was at the Anglican Center. And you have the photos on the walls of the Pope meeting the Archbishop of Canterbury, so there's a sense of kind of the importance of that place for the discussions. And then we also, visited St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican Museum, some of the older sites, Colosseum and Forum.
And you had professional guides.
We did, yeah. Very competent ones. And I appreciate about the guides, they were good at kind of integrating the Christian history alongside, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, that sort of thing. Just thinking about the Colosseum, for instance, there's a large cross in the middle, and that's where the Good Friday Stations of the Cross begins. For instance, Pope Francis will be there in March to begin that pilgrimage. So even though it's mainly known as this secular pagan site, it's interesting to see kind of the Christian thread that runs through so much of Rome. Yeah.
And you were there in the week of prayer for Christian unity, I think, weren't you?
We were, yeah. So that was the intention, of course. It kicked off with the Confession of St. Peter. It was on a Tuesday this year. So we had Eucharist at the Anglican Center with Methodists and Lutherans and Roman Catholics, and then it concluded actually with Vespers or evening prayer service at one of the papal basilicas, St. Paul's, outside the walls, and Pope Francis was the officiant there.
It must have been thrilling.
It was, yeah. I think it was such a wonderful conclusion, because so many of the people we've met with throughout the week were sitting next to us, or we saw them on up front. Archbishop Jan was participating in this service, so it really was an ecumenical, international, there were a number of languages there. A really wonderful culmination to a week of thinking and praying and talking about Christian unity.
You'll never forget that.
I don't think so.
I mean, that's in St. Paul's, well, that vast basilica.
Staggering.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the mosaics and the gold, there's nothing like it.
No. I think you told me that you had an excursion to Assisi, did you not?
We did, yes. Which I think may have been my highlight from the trip. Assisi's just a gorgeous place, you know.
And it's a couple of hours north of Rome.
Yeah, it was about 2 hours on the train. Up on a hill, so once you get up there you can see all the countryside there, and it's hard not to feel that holiness might be a little bit easier in settings like that. But we were mostly there to see the Church of St. Francis and the Church of St. Clare, which, yeah.
And what were your impressions?
Well, I think one of the things that stood out was just the sense of holiness to those places. They're a little bit less noisy than the churches in Rome, and so many people go there to make pilgrimages. So I think there's a sense of just what these churches have meant for 8 centuries, and you know, St. Clare and St. Francis continue to inspire. I mean, even the Pope taking Francis as his name, I think indicates some of the continuing power of their lives.
And in an ecological age, he's
certainly
become more popular, hasn't he?
Yeah, his ministry to all creation, I think, is certainly timely. I think too for Claire, it was wonderful just to be at her patronal.
Of course,
church.
you went along with your wife Claire.
Yes,
of course,
yes.
Deacon Claire.
Yeah,
That must have been lovely for you two to share that whole experience.
it was. Yeah, I think she'd been to Rome a few times, but never to Assisi. Yeah, and I think it's invigorating just to see how other Christians are thinking along these same lines all over the world, and to kind of get a glimpse of the way I'm connected, she's connected, we're all connected to each other by virtue of our baptism.
Invigorating, yes. We all need a bit of invigoration in the middle of 2 years of global pandemic and shutdown, don't we?
Yeah.
So it was renewing and invigorating for you. Life-giving.
I would say so, yeah. Between those very fruitful discussions and the visits, and then of course being in Rome, there's so much to see and so much to eat, and yeah, just had a wonderful time walking around. You know, you turn a corner and there's a church, and of course it's open, so you have to go inside, and just dazzling.
And what churches?
Yeah. Yeah, some of those mosaics, especially from, you know, the 8th or 9th century, that are still there, they're really stunning.
People may be interested to know that there are, in fact, 2 Anglican churches in Rome, one an American Episcopal church, and one a church from the Church of England, All Saints, and St. Paul's within the walls. Now, did you have a chance to visit
I only
them?
made it to the Episcopal Church, but it was very glad I did. They were very warm. There was some of that Midwestern warmth that,
Right.
well, the rector's from the Midwest, so I felt a certain familiarity there. But it's really a stunning building. It's got some kind of turn-of-the-century frescoes and mosaics that are certainly worth seeing, and
It's quite a lively congregation, isn't it?
It is.
In the middle of Rome.
yeah,
That might surprise people that It's two Anglican communities there.
Yeah. Seems very welcoming, and also, yeah, just an interesting mix of expats and English speakers who aren't Roman Catholic and are looking for
Diplomats.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to worship there, or?
Yep, we went to the Sunday Holy Eucharist and spoke a little bit with the rector. He showed up a number of times at some of the ecumenical gatherings, so that was
And I
fun.
gather you had a chance to worship at the Paris Caravaggio, near the Anglican Center, where, in fact, English-speaking Jesuits offer the Eucharist to English-speaking non-Roman Catholics. Do you want to just say a word about that? Anomalous
Yes.
place in the middle of
Yeah. So
outreach, I guess, ministry.
it's an interesting church. I think a 16th century church that was basically abandoned until the middle of the 20th century, or maybe even till the 70s, and then kind of refurbished, and it's looking much brighter now. And it's a small community of English speakers, but we had our first, the class had its first Holy Eucharist there, and it's very unusual for an Anglican to celebrate in a Roman Catholic context. And then we came back for Mass on Sunday and really had a wonderful welcome from them. Yeah.
No, there's nothing like it, is there?
There isn't. Yeah. I mean, you go to a church like this, which is relatively small by Roman standards, but then they mentioned that Mozart played on their organ. So there's a lot of history.
Could that be a model or a vision of the future?
Yeah,
Or an
I
element
think
of the future church?
that kind of collaboration.
Yeah, even here in Toronto.
I hope so, yeah. I think one of the things I found most moving was just the sense I received from laity, Catholic laity, of their interest in Christian unity. We hopped inside a church after dinner one night, and it was in German, and then it was in Italian, and I don't really speak either, but I caught that they were praying for Christian unity. So that was, yeah, I think that sense of on the ground working for unity was a nice complement to some of the higher level discussions, and hopefully something that can be replicated here in our own community.
Well, on that note, perhaps we should conclude, but I'm just thinking you're really at the start of your own ordained ministry, and what do you think you might have taken from this experience that you can incorporate in your ministry here ongoing? Or how are you thinking differently as a result of your experience?
I think one of the great gifts of the time was journeying alongside some of the Roman Catholic students in the class, and just the questions they asked us and the questions we asked them really made for I think a mutual recognition of where we're coming from and of our common faith. So I think that imperative to kind of start from building friendships and building relationships, and through those to work toward a closer institutional and closer ecclesial relationship is something I'm taking away, and I think something they're taking away too. So I'll be interested to see what fruit comes of all this.
Oh, that's very encouraging. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation very much, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So, adieu and farewell, and thanks to Micah for informing us and I think stimulating us once again perhaps to visit Rome with all its delights. But thank you, Micah.
Thank you,
And
Peter.
farewell and adieu from Grace Church on the Hill in Toronto at the start of February.
Thank you.
Thank you.